So thank you so much for joining us here today, Alexandria. Now, can you tell everybody who's listening who you are, what you do, and what got you into this topic specifically?
I'm so excited to talk about, well, it sounds funny to say talk about herpes, but I'm really excited to talk about dating and herpes because that's a topic that really holds people back. And that's one of the things when we're diagnosed with herpes, we think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to date again. So my story, my life with herpes, my story, I was 28 years old. I was dating someone and he didn't know he had herpes. So that's very, very, very common. 90% of the people living with genital herpes will never be diagnosed with it. And so there's a lot of people living with herpes and they're asymptomatic or don't know what it is that they're getting. And it just gets transmitted so easily, so casually. I don't necessarily mean casually with casual sex. I just mean it's almost like innocent how it's transmitted.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I was absolutely devastated. Like I said, 28 years old. At this time, it was in 2011. And I mean, it'd be devastating now in today's world, but back then, which wasn't that long ago, but the way the internet is, it was like decades, eons ago. There was no, I mean, we're on Zoom right now. Zoom didn't exist. It was GoToMeeting or something. Social media wasn't what it is now. It was extremely, it's still taboo, but talking about taboo topics just didn't exist. And so when I was diagnosed, I was alone. I was on an island. I felt extremely, the word I like to use was suffocated. I just felt suffocated from it. So I realized at the time I was not going to talk about this publicly, of course, like, oh no one's going to know that I have this. But I realized in 2017 that this is something I wanted to open up about to support people and not leave people alone like I was.
Mhm. And I'm so excited to have you on here because, as a matchmaker and an events coordinator for single individuals, we have had over the years lots of individuals that have come to us, and it's full disclosure. Like when they're signing the terms and conditions, as they're reading through it, they need to tell us everything about their lives and their past so that we're making sure we're making the proper matches. And so people would tell us very quickly, hey, I just wanted to let you know I do have herpes. We've also had requests for us to do a speed dating event just for individuals with herpes because it is so prevalent in our city and our province here. And as I started to do research, like I have to say, my first thoughts on it were like, ew, no, I'm not going to talk about it. And I was like,
Right.
oh no, I can't deal with this. And then I started doing a lot of research on it and I started having conversations around it. And I realized that my stigmas and my preconceived notions were number one, way wrong.
Mhm.
And number two, really detrimental to these individuals that, when they tell me the stories, how they got it, it's always heartbreaking. And, I can just imagine getting the results and sitting there and just being like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
the results of that can be like crushing, right? And I can only imagine. So I was really excited to have you on because I don't want I don't want preconceived notions to
Mhm.
really detriment or cause
Mhm.
problems for the singles that we work with or any singles for that matter. So the more information we can get out there, the better. So I was so excited to have you on. Now, can you tell me some of the first myths that you thought of or you hear a lot of? Like, what are the myths that we have, and can we debunk even like one or two of them?
Yeah. So I want to back up a little bit and say that I knew what herpes was before I got it.
Mm,
I was a sex educator. I was a peer educator in high school. Planned Parenthood partnered with my high school. And so I was one of the teenagers that went out to the other high schools in San Diego. And I was 16 and talked to other 16-year-olds about anatomy and physiology and about STIs and birth control. So I knew I was up to date on it. And the thing is I still got it. And
yeah.
so that's one of the things that's a huge myth is we think that like, oh, well, we know the type of people that get it. Like it's,
I
oh, I'm not that
totally.
person. Right. And that was what I believed. I believe, well, I'm never going to get herpes because first of all, I know about it. I know what it is. I know how it's transmitted. I know it can be dormant. I know all those things, but I'm never going to date anybody that has it because
Yeah.
that's just not me. So again, someone that knew the facts still didn't believe. I didn't believe it was going to happen. So we think it's always someone else, or we think it's going to be, well, he or she is going to look this way or that way or have this characteristic. And so the truth is, it has nothing to do with cleanliness. It has nothing to do with the way you look. It has nothing to do with how many partners you've had. It has to do with, number one, are you getting tested? That definitely helps. Are you having those conversations with a partner? But even if you are, like I did, my partner didn't know
Mm-hmm.
and he got tested, but
Mm-hmm.
herpes is not included in the STI panel.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really? I
So
didn't know that.
yes, that's the big thing. Is so you may think you're being a responsible sexually active adult, you're getting tested, all these things, and it's not included in the panel. So you have people coming back and saying, "Oh, negative, negative, negative. Here, we're good to go." And we
Mm-hmm.
have partners going, "We're good to go." And all of a sudden, they show up with one of them shows up with something, and they're like, "Where'd this come from?" So that's a huge thing that we are not aware of. Another thing that's extremely um, sad, this one's a really hard one for me to hear in relationships, is herpes can be dormant in your system. So you could have picked this up at 20 years old and you could be 40 years old in a monogamous relationship, in a marriage, whatever. And all of a sudden this shows up down there and you're like, where did this come from?
Mm-hmm.
So you could have picked it up a long time ago, or your spouse could have had it unknowingly, been dormant in his or her system, and all of a sudden it shows up. So that happens a lot in marriages, and they're like, then there's all
Who's
this lack.
cheating? Who's doing this? Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another big one. The herpes virus, you can pick it up and it doesn't necessarily show up in your system for weeks, months, decades. I
Mm-hmm.
talked to a woman who was 87 years old, had been a widow for 15 years. And she's like, and so, hadn't had sex. And she's like, where did this come from? I'm like, you picked it up either in your marriage or before your marriage. I don't,
Oh my gosh. Wow.
yes, that's
Now,
another big one.
can you tell us why isn't it in the panel? Is it just like a different type of test, or is that something that needs to change?
It needs to change. And
Okay.
here's my thought on it. Well, there's a couple thoughts on it. Number one, the aftermath of someone learning they have herpes is far more detrimental many times with the mental side of it than somebody having herpes. So like I mentioned earlier, majority of the population with herpes are asymptomatic. Majority of the people don't know they have it and will never get an outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is, well, why would we tell people? The stigma is so detrimental. Why would we even tell them? Let's
Mm-hmm.
just let them go on with their life. That's one side of it. The other side of it is herpes isn't a big deal medically. It doesn't cause things. It just causes uncomfortable blisters. That's
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah.
So it's not causing long life, you know what I mean? It long lifetime trickle effect of, well, you have this and then you get this and then you're going to lose your left pinky toe. No,
Yeah.
like it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
So it
So
really is just like a cosmetic thing. It is just kind of like a little bit of a, it's not a huge issue.
exactly. And
Wow.
here's the other reason why it's not included in the panel. And oral herpes,
Mm-hmm.
cold sores, oral herpes, fever blisters, HSV1 is herpes too. Is
Mm-hmm.
herpes as well. I should say as well, not is herpes as well. So you have people that get fever. Oh, I get fever blisters, but I don't have herpes. Oh, no, I don't have that. Right.
Right.
So that's the whole thing. People don't realize if you get cold sores, fever blisters, that is herpes, and it can be transmitted to your partner by doing things with your mouth.
Mm.
So whether it's you kiss your partner or you do other things with your partner down there, that also is sexually transmitted.
Yeah.
So when you add in the people that have oral herpes and the people that have genital herpes and put that all into a big category, roughly 80% of the population is living with some type of herpes, whether it's up here or down there.
Mm-hmm. You know what's interesting is that I have the oral herpes,
Uh-huh.
and it was from me being a little girl, and my mom had it and she kissed me goodnight.
And there you go.
And that's how, and I've had it maybe 3 times since I was like 4,
Mhm.
right? And it
Yep.
just has like a little outbreak or whatever. And
There you
yeah,
go.
yeah, that's
Yep.
wild.
Yep.
So there's
And
not a huge difference between the oral herpes and the genital herpes.
no, not at all. HSV1 is most commonly associated with oral herpes. And if you think about it, our mouths are exposed. It's a
Mhm.
skin to skin transmission. So our genitals are not exposed, right? We don't go around all day. We're not, living in that era where you don't wear pants. So our mouths are exposed. Like you said, your mother kissed you. We kiss family members. We share water bottles. We share a beer. Oh, can I get a sip of your beer? Let me try your beer. Whatever it is, we share things all the time. We come in contact. So that is far more common.
Mhm.
However, HSV1 is now very, very, very common down there
Mhm. Yeah.
genitally. We
Yeah.
have a lot of teens, we have a lot of people in their 20s getting it down there because
Mhm.
we don't realize people with oral herpes don't realize that it could be transmitted. So we don't think of disclosing.
Wow. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Mhm.
Now, so where do you think that stigma comes from that it's like, I mean, that just sounds so innocent. It just sounds so normal. Like how you just described it. It was like that's just a normal thing that, 80% of the population is dealing with. Now, where did this stigma come from that it was this kind of like ick? Where
I
did
know.
is it from the sexual aspect of it or what is that?
I think there's a couple of different things going along with it. When we talk about sex, sex is taboo regardless, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it's going to be, especially in Western culture. That's all I can speak of is, living in the United States and that, and it's taboo, right? We don't talk about it. It's, oh, it's still an uncomfortable conversation, even though we're doing a much better job about talking about sexual health and things like that, but it's still uncomfortable. So anything associated with sex is going to be taboo. Anything negative, anything, it's like, oh, well, again, I know why you got that. I know why you got herpes, or you were messing around, or you shouldn't be doing that, and that's why you got it. So there's that whole mindset around it.
Mhm.
Then also the drug companies got really, really smart, and they decided they discovered Valtrex, which is an antiviral that can be prescribed to people that have herpes. And in the early 80s, they got really smart and decided, how do we sell this? And so they created the stigma around genital herpes, and they made it, you have to take this drug or else you will be solo, you'll be single, you'll never find anybody. So it was the drug companies that created that.
Really?
Mhm.
Ugh, I've heard so many stories like that. It's so frustrating.
I know. And especially because think about HPV, right? HPV has been around as long as HSV.
Mhm.
And we can throw HIV in there, but let's just talk about HPV. HPV didn't become something that was discussed until the late 1990s, early 2000s,
Yeah.
until they had a vaccine for it.
Right.
I had never heard about it, didn't really know what it was until there was the whatever Gardasil or whatever.
Yeah.
They portrayed it as like the marketing was, let's do this. It's going to be okay. They didn't portray it as, oh, well, you're bad
Mhm.
since you're going to get that. You know what I mean? So the way they portrayed it, same with HIV, right? It's portrayed as, we're going to fix this together. We're going to have walks together. We're going to march through this together. We're going to find a solution. It doesn't just impact homosexual men, it impacts everybody. They've
Mhm.
never done that for herpes. It's like,
Right.
ew, gross.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's talk about I want to talk obviously we have people that are listening that, do have herpes and don't have herpes. I want to speak to the people that don't have herpes,
Mhm.
they're out dating and say for example whether you're online dating or on your first date or you're just about to get intimate with somebody and they tell you, "Hey, I have genital herpes."
Mhm.
Is how should they properly react? What are some ways to really determine if this partnership makes sense moving forward for them? Like tell us a little bit about the thought process of
What
what
we
may be
do.
going on there. Yeah.
Right. So first of all, I want you to acknowledge that this person is someone of integrity. He or she truly cares about you and is building this foundation with not a house of cards. This person is building a foundation with you, a relationship with you. So first of all, we need to look at that aspect and really, you don't need to like, congratulations, you told me, but it's like, wow, this person really does care about me and is
Mhm.
caring about our health and our sexual health. So I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, opposed to, ooh, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
disgusting. So whether this person comes to you and says, I have oral herpes, I have genital herpes, whatever it is, no matter where it is, it can still get transmitted to either location on you.
Mhm.
Um, what I would recommend is you doing your own research around it and knowing your own facts.
Mhm.
Google can be really scary. I don't recommend looking at photos because that's not necessarily what we're dealing with.
Mhm.
But just learning some facts about how common it is, how it gets transmitted, um, and also know that, and a thought process. We think, oh well, this person has it, so I don't want to be with this person. I'll just go find someone else.
Mhm.
You're more likely to find somebody else with herpes than without herpes,
Oh, wow. Just statistically.
statistically.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Yes. That's also something very interesting to think about. And this person is coming to you and telling you,
Mhm.
opposed to someone not knowing they have it. Like I mentioned earlier, 90% of the people living with genital herpes do not know they have it. Also, people with oral herpes are not necessarily diagnosed either, and don't necessarily realize they have it either a lot of the time. So I'd recommend you also getting tested to see if you have it. Like I said, it's not included in the STI panels, and um, figuring out a combination together. So what I like to look at is, this is a partnership, and know what you got, what works for you. What works for my husband and I may not necessarily work for you and your partner or whatever. So have some conversations. Is this monogamous relationship? Is it non-monogamous? Is it uh, what are we going to do for protection? Is the person that has herpes taking an antiviral or not? Is this person saying like, hey, I have it, I'm asymptomatic, I've never had an outbreak? Or is this person saying, I get an outbreak every month? Talk about it and see what's happening. Are we going to use condoms? Are we not going to use condoms? Something to be aware of, condoms only prevent transmission between 30 and 50% of the time. So
Mhm.
they're not always going to protect the person. Um, find out this person gets his or her outbreak. So I can use myself as an example, especially when it comes to condoms. I get my outbreaks on my tailbone.
Mhm.
You can use the condom all you want. My tailbone is still exposed,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
right? The other thing about herpes, genital herpes, is we think it's just on the genital, but it can be on the butt. It can be below your belly button. It can be on your inner thigh. It can be on your hamstring. It can be anywhere kind of in the boxer region. So again, condoms may work great if it's on, for example, a cervix or on somewhere on the penis, right? Because it's going to cover that. But if it's not going to cover it, then you still may be exposed. So these are all conversations that we need to have as a partnership to feel what works best for us.
I have a friend, and on my journey, when I first started being introduced to it, and on like when I was learning up about it, my friend, her husband has herpes, and
Mhm.
they've been together for 14 years, and she still doesn't have herpes. And she says, when he has an outbreak, which is about once every 2 years, we just abstain,
Right.
so
Exactly.
that's what made sense for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And every couple is going to go through different phases. You know what I mean? Like there's always the phase, well, not always, but most couples go through a phase of, we're going to use a condom. Then they kind of go, we're not. And then different things. People will come to me and say, well, I want to have a baby, what do I do? And I'm like, you have sex. Like that's what you do. And they'll say like, well, what about the condom? And I'm like, if that's an issue, that shouldn't be a condom shouldn't be the issue if you're planning on having a baby. There's way bigger fish to fry in a relationship at that point than the condom. So
Yeah.
every relationship's different and different phases.
Yeah.
Yeah, my husband doesn't have it either.
Mhm.
So it's possible not to transmit it.
Yeah. Okay. So say we're a single person
Okay.
and we are out dating, and somewhere along the line we have an outbreak, or we go and we get tested and we ask for the additional panel for this, and we get the results back, hey, we have genital herpes. Can you walk us through the next steps of what they should do, either with past partners or what have you, and how they should move forward in dating to communicate properly?
Okay, so as far as past partners, I would invite yourself to look at a couple things. Why is it do you want to reach out to the past partner? Is it out of spite? Is it out of, well, maybe he or she has it and will like run off and get married on a white horse, right? You know what I mean? Like what's your thought process behind this? Or is it out of education? Um, so I invite yourself to look at that. Like I said, it can be dormant in your system for a long time. So
Mhm.
If you're like, gosh, I haven't had a partner for 3 years and this showed up. If that person has moved on and that person's married and that person, you go on Facebook or Instagram and see that person's married with 3 kids. I don't know if it's really the right thing at that point to go like interrupt someone's life, and you know what I mean? But that's going to be up to you.
Should they
So
not be made aware that, you may have had it when you were with them, whether you picked it up from them or not? Like because I know with other STDs, you are recommended to reach out to past partners just so that they can get tested and check it out. Is that something you would recommend?
I'd recommend it if it's somebody that's definitely recent. I would not recommend it if it's like stage 5 clinger and you're like, I have to get a restraining order. Like, no, if
Yeah.
because people have come to me in that, or they'll say, I'm actually scared for my life if I disclose. I'm like, do not disclose to it. Like, if
Okay.
it's gonna, right, if we're gonna have to get restraining orders and go into hiding, no, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
But if it's someone that you're like, yeah, I've had a partner and this just showed up, then yes, I believe it's the right thing to do.
Mhm.
Um, Again, like I said, if you look back and you look this from years ago and you think the person that gave it to you is married and has kids, and you're like, probably not the best thing to open Pandora's box at that point.
Mhm.
I personally went back to my partners, and I went back quite far because I did know it was dormant, or it could have been dormant. It wasn't, but I did know that. And so I did go back to past partners. It was very interesting to see personalities when you
The different
tell someone.
reactions.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah.
Very interesting. Definitely the true colors come out there. It's
Can you give us
very,
some examples of some of those reactions? Because I think that's a big fear, is not knowing what you can expect from someone's reaction. What are some examples of what you saw or have heard of?
so I did it as like a public service announcement, as like, hey, this happened. I just want
Yeah.
you to know, and maybe you should get tested. If you find out you had it, let me know. That's great. If not, wish you the best of luck in your life or whatever. Um, someone that I thought would have been there for me was like, there's no way it was me. His response was, can I say a cuss word? I don't.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Okay. He's like, my dick is as clean as a needle. And I was like,
Oh dear.
okay. So he's like, I would never sleep with anybody like that. And I was like, okay.
Oh, okay.
That was one of them. Another one just said, like, it was a text, like, thanks. I don't think I have it, which, good luck. Another one, a couple respond, again, I went back like years. Another one was actually very kind. And he's like, what do you need? Can I be there for you? What do you need?
Mhm.
I'm not trying to get back with you, but what do you need? And the person that I actually ended up having the relationship with, he had it, he kicked me out of his house, called me disgusting, wouldn't let me sit down on the sofa. And at the time when I was diagnosed, I also had a yeast infection. I had my period, got my period, and got herpes. So I went to the pharmacy and I bought tampons, got the yeast infection medication and the antiviral, and I bought a bottle of wine, and I bought M&Ms,
Oh. And
right?
you had a night. Yeah.
Ugh. Well, anyway, so I checked out, and so I was telling the guy that I was with, and he's like, "Oh, well, your pharmacist must have thought like you're like such a slut or something." Like it was really like
Yeah.
the person that you're with, you don't expect that, especially the person that gave it to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if you don't mind sharing, like he obviously found out that it came from him. How did his kind of attitude change towards it? Was there any conversations around that with you two, or as he went through that?
Yes. It took him, what was frustrating for me is it took him a long time to get tested for it. He
Mm.
just was in denial about it and took him a long time. And I was like, come on, let's get like, it's been enough. It took him like 6 weeks to get tested. And then his results came back and he was positive for it. He kind of went dark for a little bit, and um yeah, he just, his mindset did change about it, but I don't, I, yeah, I can't really speak up from his point of view. I think he
Yeah.
still, I don't know. I don't really know what he thought about it, but,
Yeah.
and people could say, well, how do you know it was from him?
Hmm.
So I want to touch on that because
Yeah.
I mentioned it can be dormant in your system for a long time. I had been tested right before we slept together and my tests were negative. So
Mm.
my blood test was negative. And what that means is for a blood test, if you have the antibodies in your system, then you've had it for a while. So if my blood test was negative before sleeping with him, and then a few weeks later, I end up with it. I didn't have it before I slept with him.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
didn't know that the day that I called past partners.
Yeah.
um, but I learned that along the way. So when he got tested just a few weeks later, he was positive with antibodies, which means it was in his system. My antibody
Okay.
test was still negative. So that's how I know it was from him. So a lot of people, again, in marriages or something will come back with both antibodies positive and they're like, well, we don't know who gave it to who, but we both have it.
Yeah,
So
totally. Fascinating. Okay, so you have it and you are going to start dating. Um, Number one, I bet you it's a feeling of kind of terror of, dating is scary already. Dating is daunting already, trying to find that partnership. And then to add this layer to
mhm,
it, can you speak on some feelings and some thoughts that
yes.
either you had when you got out dating or, what people could be feeling right now?
So it took me 2 years.
Hmm.
I was what I call in the Eeyore phase of being diagnosed. Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh, he has a rain cloud over him. He just stays to himself. He's always depressed. That was literally me for 2 years. And I truly believed to my core that nobody else would want me. Nobody else was going to desire me. Anybody would look at me as disgusting. So I stayed with the guy that I got herpes from for 2 years. And I was turning 30 and I thought, I don't want to be with him. I don't want to marry him. I don't see this go. It was not a good relationship for either one of us. And I thought, I have to get out of this relationship. I have to move on. So I decided that by 30, um, I made a little goal. Like I'm going to meet my husband before I'm 30.
Love it.
Doesn't mean I'm dating him, doesn't mean I'm engaged, but I was like, I'm going to meet him before I'm 30. And so about 6 months before I realized this, so I thought, okay, I'm going to start dating. I'm going to go out. And one of the things that I'm very adamant about, especially when I talk to people who are ready to start dating, I say, you do not have to disclose you have herpes unless you're going to expose that person to it.
Hmm.
So going on a date for coffee is literally you're going on a date for coffee. You're not showing up with your herpes virus.
Hmm.
You're talking about your double espresso and do I like you? And are there rainbows and butterflies when I meet you? Or is there an excitement? Did I have fun? Are you somebody that I want to go on a second date with? So I went on many dates and I said yes to anybody that asked me, unless it was like stranger danger type of
Yeah.
person, like bad vibes. But it didn't matter if he was old, young, tall, short, bald, like none of that mattered. And I went out because I wanted to put out that mindset that I'm ready to do this. Like,
Mhm.
not this, well, he has to be this, and this. Yes, that is what I wanted to marry, but to go on a date and get ice cream, I didn't need him to be in that category.
Mhm. Now, okay, this is kind of going to be off topic. I want to
Yeah.
hear a little bit about how did you meet your current partner? Like, how did he fit into that this, and this, or was he outside of it because you were opening up to everybody? What did that look
Right.
like?
So the funny thing is, um, so my husband, so I met him when I was 26. So I already had met him. Um, but didn't know he was my husband. So he and I were colleagues together. So we worked together. So I actually walked into the office the day I was diagnosed. It was the Friday before the 4th of July. So not really many people were in the office. And I walked in and I was white as a ghost,
Mm.
just like, devastated, but had to go back to work. And he asked me what's wrong? What's wrong, Alexandra? And I just lost it. Like,
Oh.
start crying and just lost it. And so, of course, I disclosed in that matter, in that setting, and told him. And there was no romantic. We weren't romantic. There was nothing going on. But I was one of the people I told, and so he's like, "I'm here for you. What do you need?" So fast forward, I think like 6 years later, we ended up dating. So
Oh, how
mhm,
did that gap bridge? Like how, oh my gosh, it's so hard to go from friendship or even just like professional friendship
yeah.
to a romantic. How did you guys bridge that gap?
Well, like I said, I dated a lot. So he saw all the flowers come through the office and the seized candies and, the guys picking me up after work, like all that stuff. He saw all that, which was great when we ended up getting together because he had known all my history and he'd met everybody.
Yeah.
Um, so it just transpired at the time when I was diagnosed with herpes, he was married, and eventually that sunsetted. And so as time went on, I was single, he was single, and there we go.
Just happened. Wow.
That just
Did someone
happened.
profess love to someone or was it just like organic?
It was organic.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool. I'm
I
always
love
so
it. Yeah,
fascinated with how that goes
I
because I've
know.
only ever met somebody in a romantic way. I've never gone from friendship to romance before.
Mhm.
And I always just found it fascinating because I've never been in that world. So I'm like, how does that happen? But yeah,
Yeah.
love it. So
Yes.
cool. Okay. So I love what you said in regards to when you're dating, you don't need to, because I see it sometimes, like we online date for people sometimes. I see it on people's profiles. They're telling me before, we have had 5 messages back and forth. Sometimes people feel that they have to say it on a first date, but I feel the same, whether it's something big that you want to disclose, whatever it may be, it doesn't have to be herpes, but whatever you want it to be, you have to qualify that individual to hold
Yeah.
space for whatever is you need to communicate with them.
And whoever you're on a date with, he or she has something that they need to tell you too.
Yeah.
And they're not going to tell you over your double espresso.
No.
It's going to be down the road. And we should treat herpes just like that.
Yeah.
Do I like this person? Does the person make me feel good? Does this person treat other people well? Does this person fit into my category of what I like? And then we get to this. Did I have fun with this person?
Yeah.
And I want you to realize if you are someone that discloses even before you go on a date, that's okay. But the reason why you're doing it is because on some level, you're so, so, so scared of rejection that you don't want to get into a relationship and be rejected.
Hmm.
And the cover story is, well, I just don't want to waste someone's time. I don't want to waste his or her time. That may be true, but you're not wasting someone's time because that person is agreeing to show up and be there with you. So both of you are in agreement of, I want to meet someone. I want to be here. I want to be at this ice cream shop with you, sharing Cherry Garcia, like whatever it is. I want to be here with you. So you're not wasting his or her time. And if someone ever tells you that, well, you should have told me in the beginning. The reason why rejection happens, in my opinion, for herpes, are 3 things. Number one, the person just isn't emotionally mature to have this conversation. You
Hmm.
can be 15 or 55. It doesn't matter your age. The idea of sex or STIs or that whole, it's like a silly conversation to the person. They're just not able to have the conversation. So that's number one. Number two, that person has a core belief, I like to say, married to a concept that will not change. So we can use religion. If someone is Catholic, they're not going to agree with the Jewish faith. Someone of the Jewish faith is not going to agree with the Catholic faith. There's no in between. It's black and white. They're never going to agree. Right. So it's such a rooted belief there that it's not going to change. Number three, and this is the hardest one to hear, and this is the one that just gets you the most, is that person's not into you.
Hmm.
Period, the end. And you made it really easy. You T-balled it. You gave them a really easy reason to reject you. And of course, they're going to use that. They're not going to say it's because I don't like who you are as a person. They're going to say it's because you have herpes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the hardest to hear. But the good news is you found out 3 weeks in, 3 dates in, whatever, you found out that person is not into you. And telling them up front, that person never has an opportunity to meet you
Hmm.
and get
Hmm.
to know you because you're
Hmm.
not your herpes virus. The disclosure is the easiest, hardest conversation you're going to have in a relationship. Easiest,
Yeah.
hardest. Is it a hard conversation? Yeah. But should it be your easiest, hardest? Absolutely.
Amazing. I love that actually. And it's interesting because I've had a couple of people say, you should do a specific singles event for people with herpes. And I've never wanted to do it mostly because I'm thinking, why do you need to go find somebody who also has herpes in order to date them? right? I was like, that is the least of compatibilities that we should be looking for.
Mhm.
So why would
Yes,
we host an event for that? Because there's so many other things that make you compatible with a person that that's just not even on the list, right?
absolutely.
That we both have herpes, like what?
Yeah, right. And I understand where that comes from, and that person is probably hasn't dealt with his or her own issues with herpes and his or her own beliefs. Because the thing is like, well, I feel I'm disgusting, so no one else is going to love me. So I better find someone else that thinks that he or she is disgusting, so that we can both. I mean, they're not really thinking that, but that's the belief of I'm not worthy, I'm disgusting, I'm not worthy of love. And so therefore, well, I'll just find someone else who understands that.
Right. Do you
Mhm.
have any resources that you can plug into? Because that's, going on that journey would look different for everybody. But what are there books about this kind of help you on that confidence journey through this process? Are there podcasts? Like, what resources can people plug into?
That's a really heavy, that's like so many directions. I'm like, where do I go with this?
Where do you go?
So so I have a support group. And so
Mhm.
that's one of the things that we really work on in that is understanding it and talking about it. And number one, what is herpes? Like we just need to know what it is on a basic like herpes 101. Then when you learn what it is, you're like, oh, I'm letting this microscopic virus that over 80% of the population already has, I'm letting it control my life. But really, it's diving deeper into our conscious and subconscious beliefs. That's actually something I'm coming out with in the future, but it's understanding our subconscious beliefs. And that's what is controlling our thought process
Mhm.
of going forward. But just on a like basic level, there are a couple books. One of them is The Good News About the Bad News. It's in Amazon.
Mhm.
And that one is specifically on herpes. And then I can't remember who wrote it, but
I'll add it to my show notes so people can
yeah,
go.
that's
Yeah,
a
I'll
good
look it up
one.
and I'll add it into the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I would say my community,
Yeah. How do they
it's
access your community?
so it's you can go to lifewithherpes.com and it is a paid subscription. It's very reasonable. It's $15 a month. And we
Wow.
have an
Yeah.
online community. Yeah, it's very reasonable. I want it to be available to everybody that needs it. And we have weekly live calls and access to the group. And I would say that's going to be your best place
Mhm.
to start this journey.
You're doing amazing work
Thank you.
because, like, is there a large community of, individuals like you that are pioneering this, or is this just kind of like the beginning of all of this?
So I started this in 2017 and I was the only one.
Yeah.
There was maybe someone here or there mentioning it. But yeah, I definitely pioneered it. Now, the good news is there are other people on social media talking about it, and it's great because we all bring a different vibe to it, and a different lifestyle to it. I'm in my 40s, I'm married, I'm a mom. I'm no longer in the single 20s dating. But there's people that are in that phase, and there's men and all different aspects of it. So that's the beautiful thing is depending on where you fit in your life, there really is someone out there now to support you with it.
Okay, so we have lifewithherpes.com. Again, all of this is going to be in the show notes, you guys.
Mhm.
Now, for social media on where people can go follow your stuff, like, are you on Facebook? Are you on Instagram? How can people find you?
All of the above.
Okay.
So I have a podcast, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, Pinterest. That's actually a really hot one right now.
Hmm.
TikTok. So I'm whatever your vice is, whatever
On all of
your
it.
yeah, wherever you like to go, I am there.
I
So
love it. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna have all of those details in there now. Um, I would love for you to end this call with just like a little motivational,
mhm.
almost like dating coaching or just coaching in general on somebody that feels icky and somebody that feels like you said, nobody's gonna love me. I don't know if I should start dating. What is that motivational thing that you have to say to them to finish off the episode?
I would say, first of all, figure out what it is you want, not what you think you want, not what you think you should do because now you have the virus. What is it that you want? And if you truly want that beautiful, compassionate, loving, incredible bond that you share with somebody else. If you want that loving relationship, you deserve it. Like there, and because you have herpes there's no reason why you cannot have that. That's the stigma talking. That's the society stigma that's talking. I take full responsibility for playing into that stigma before I had it. I laughed at the jokes. I made the jokes. We've all done it.
Mhm.
Um, I got sidetracked there, but if that is something you want, there is nothing holding you back from that. You just have to go out and find it.
Mhm.
And you have to go out and make it. So what is that version of the person that you see in a relationship? And I mean you, like what does he or she look like? Is she doing something? I'm speaking she because I'm a she, but is I looked at myself like, was I acting different? Was I approaching life different? What was my mindset? What does someone in a relationship do? And I started embodying that and I started becoming that so that I was then ready to be in that relationship.
Mhm.
So I would
Amazing.
say start looking at those things. And one of the things that I did and I realized at 29 years old, turning 30, is I was angry at men. I didn't trust men at that point. I was very, very angry. And I couldn't watch, like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. And I couldn't watch Bridesmaids. And I couldn't watch any like silly, fun movie about romance. Like I couldn't do it. I would leave the movie theater in tears. I couldn't do it. And I realized I was the problem, not the guys I was dating. It was me. I had to figure it out. And so I pretended that I was a Care Bear. And that sounds really funny, but I encourage you to do this. So every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. And so I realized I was giving off anger. I was giving off resentment. I was giving off, I don't trust you. And so I was going to get that back. And so, and we know Care Bears, they have, they have a rainbow on their tummy, they have a heart, they have a shamrock, they have, I don't know, a lightning bolt, whatever they have on their tummies. And they like protrude whatever that emotion is to people. And I thought, well, if I'm protruding anger, I need to protrude love. So I literally pretended like I was giving off love to everybody I met. And I don't mean that romantic. I don't mean that lust. I don't mean like I'm going to run off and marry you. I meant just like genuine compassion for any person I came in contact with. And as I started doing that, I started getting that back. And so that's what I recommend doing. And it may sound silly, but it works. So
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on today. I know that we made a huge impact today in someone's life, and you're doing amazing work. And I just really appreciate you taking your time to be here today.
thank you. I was so excited to be on the show today. So thanks.